Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. I'm here with the coach, John Brett.
Man, I'm here with the vet, Mr. Ian Griffin, and a couple great guests look like we got tonight.
Oh, yes. It's going to be a good night tonight, Coach. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the Cowboys won. They're on a roll, so how can it be a bad night? I mean, come on now.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, it looks like I'm going to introduce Mr. Don MacCuish. I hope I say that correct. And he's the loose cannon. That's what I hear. He's a loose cannon, but glad to have you. Also, I think the vet has a photo he's going to throw up. I want to see this.
Yep. You're going to be surprised at this, and I don't think he's a loose cannon after I show this one.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah, I just, of all the pictures that are probably most appropriate right now, just a moment to reflect on Colin Powell. Really just one word, admiration. For those that, have not served, it's just a different generation of leaders. I can honestly say that when folks my age grew up, we just admired our senior leader in Colin Powell. And although we still have great leaders in the military, I don't think they rise to the level of admiration that we have for folks like Powell. And so I don't really have anything else to say other than he is going to be missed. It's a shame he never did run for president because he would have been a leader rather than a politician in the White House. And we could definitely have used that over the past couple decades.
And Don, I totally agree. And there's been so many people that I've talked to even prior to his death over the last few years and almost everyone unanimously shakes their head when someone says, he should have ran for president. Isn't that crazy that would have been one person that probably both parties could have said, hey, let's give him a chance because he had that much respect from the nation. Today I've heard a few people talk about, the Iraq deal. That wasn't his fault. I mean, he was given bad information. But outside of that, name one thing that you could even say negative about Colin Powell. I mean, that's unbelievable, man, that we lost.
Yeah, he's one of the greatest what if stories in modern political history. What if? How would the Republican Party and Democrat parties be different today had he been the one that ran instead of us selecting Bob Dole to run against Clinton?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I agree. So before I introduce my guy, I'll say this about Colin Powell. There's selfless service is the first thing I think of when I think of Colin Powell. He put the country's agenda before his, period. He always did that. Second, he was truly a humble individual. And if you ever hear the story about how he lost his 9mm, was 45, in Vietnam, when he could have lied about it, could have got himself out of trouble. He was a young lieutenant. He just took it on the chin, but he learned a valuable lesson. And then he went and told that story to other people so they could learn that lesson of humility. I think it is powerful. And so there's just a lot of great lessons from Colin Powell, and he was the real deal. And I hope history portrays it instead of we get some antsy history writers in there, So, but other than that, I have to throw out my guest tonight. He's the first timer on this show tonight. It's Brett Meadows, and he's the most courageous individual I know besides Alan Bailey because he put up with my son in ROTC. So, Brett, I'm going to throw it to you, and I'm going to put a picture up for you, all right?
Thank you. I'd like to, obviously, that's back in the day when we still wore ACUs. But, if Ty does get to see the broadcast, I'll tell you that he was actually a very quiet, reserved student. So it's a pleasure to be on, first time speaking, and hope to contribute to your broadcast.
We appreciate it. Here's a second picture. Yeah, what do we got here?
Got to throw the wife in there every now and then.
I see the Roll Tide jersey she has on. Oh, my. Is that a divided household? Were you a Notre Dame fan?
Well, yeah. If you remember a few years back, being a Notre Dame football fan, it was probably the worst day of my life when we were getting beat something like 47-0 at halftime. My wife's cheering, and then they, run the touchdown back in the start of the third quarter, and I left. So, yeah, definitely rough times during that time period.
Well, it's good to have you on, Brett. We're excited. I think we'll have a great show tonight. So I'm going to throw it back to the coach and let him start it out.
Well, one of the things that I've loved about this vet is that the people that we have on here, it seems to be a whole lot of military people. And I have such respect for the military people. My dad, grandfathers, everybody was in the military. And I just decided I didn't want to do that growing up. And it's been one of my regrets. I tell that to people all the time. If I could do my young life over, it would be to go ahead and go in the military and serve. So guys, from me, thank you so much. Now, we're going to talk about the first thing we're going to talk about is, first of all, I want to know where the border czar is. First of all, the border czar, VP Harris. Where has this woman been? I don't know. She's hiding out, but that we did have a location spot for her. She showed up. And so what are your thoughts? And I'm going to first ask Don, and then we'll go to Brett, and then we'll end with the vet and myself. But what are your thoughts of the VP doing a studio stunt on a series of Get Curious with the vice president? Well, I'd get curious, all right, with Vice President Harris, where she had child actors on watching in awe as she discussed her passion for science. Does using actors in a setup make us trust the administration more or less, or does it even matter? I mean, this is a question we need to hit. Brett, I can tell you about ready to take this one, but Don, go ahead. Go ahead, and then we'll go to Brett.
Kamala. I mean, is there anything good that does come out of California? I'll tell you, this story is so quintessential of what California stands for, and that's Hollywood and Disneyland. I mean, it is, the idea of hiring actors. Okay, yeah, it's funny. Does it really matter? No, in the big scheme of things. I think it's more about, what are your priorities? I mean, what are the things that President Biden or your constituents have asked of you? And this is what your focus is. I mean, think of what's been going on the last couple of weeks. I mean, what else, even in California, what's going on in California, her home state? And we'll talk about it later, so I won't bring up more than just, the supply chain issues out there. But what else has our country dealt with? I mean, she was in charge of the border and security of the border and figuring out the border crisis. She ain't been down there doing videos. The mess in Afghanistan and the evacuations of Afghan refugees and American citizens and soldiers. Is she involved in that? Nope. She's busy making videos with child actors. Even COVID. I mean, we're still talking about COVID, right? I mean, we're still masking up every time we go into a government building. Where is she on addressing COVID response and building confidence for Americans to get vaccinated? I mean, we've politicized COVID so much that we have people that just refuse to get vaccinated because it's their right to not do that. The only reason people are taking that stance is because we've had leaders that have built a level of distrust in the way that they communicate. And so really, I think some of our leaders should focus on trying to communicate to those that already have a lack of trust in them and try and build that trust in them. And so when you do something like this, that is clearly going to make those that oppose you take one step further away from you, I don't see any benefit or any value in doing it. Unfortunately, it really doesn't matter in the big scheme of things, but it does not build any confidence in the portion of America that has a lack of trust in her performance already.
Yeah, exactly, Brett. Before I throw it to you, I mean, it's true, Don. What we need from a vice president, especially one that's a first female vice president, she had a great opportunity, as the vet and I discussed on the previous episode, to step up and say something about the women's rights of the Afghani people, or excuse me, the Afghani women, when that was about to change, and she did nothing. She had another great opportunity to come down here and show compassion and empathy for children and women on the border. She did nothing. And only two places I've seen her, Don and Vet and Brett, is that she's been in California to promote the governor there, and now to do this, Hollywood, Disneyland, like you said, slant on, hang out with Kamala. I mean, maybe she should go to the border and get the new Menudo, do something, get some actors, do something at the border. Let's do something, Brett.
Okay. So by researching this, I was forced to watch the video, which was painstaking. So I tried to think, what's the benefit of this and how it could tie into something positive, right? I don't want to be negative about the administration all the time, right? So I looked up some statistics and I thought, okay, so here's my take on it. You ready? All right. STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, coming out of the collegiate environment of ROTC, I thought, okay, so we're going to have the first female vice president, and we're going to try to maybe push STEM, right, for the females. Right now, it says about 29% of STEM workers in the workplace are female. So I thought maybe that's a goal, right? It could be, it's possible, right, to where she's going to try to use her position as a female to try to push a STEM agenda, at least to get, female students more interested in these new technologies. So I thought maybe that's a goal, right? Now, with the border and everybody's, trust me, I mean, Don said it perfectly. Where are you at on the border? But if you've noticed in recent weeks, they're starting to trend to where there's 5 different cabinet members who visited the border, and we're shifting away from the VP actually being in charge of the border. So they're trying to relinquish that quietly away from the press, right? And so when I looked at the video, there was something that was really it caught me more off guard. And in passing, when you look at it, you think, okay, it's just an answer or a response. But I want you to, if you actually have the time to go back and look, this is the quote she gives, right? The first question, right, is they ask, and she says, this is the best advice I can give you, right, as a young man or woman, right? She says, never let anybody tell you who you are. And she's overacting and very proud of it, right? In fact, she says, you tell them who you are, right? And at first, it doesn't seem that relevant to me. But then when I think about it, this administration, they never answer questions from the press, right? They never take any kind of questions from anybody. So it's kind of typical that advice is they never, ever take questions. So they're always telling you who they are, but they're never letting you basically listen and make your own opinion of this administration. So, a lot to be said for it. The one thing I did like, though, is if you're going to make a production, don't hire a company that is titled Sinking Ship Entertainment who done the production for it. So there's something else for you. That's who actually produced it. So, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, the whole thing was interesting. When I looked it up and saw it, I laughed, but then I realized I had to do a little background on it, and then I saw that it said that this is World Space Week is what they were saying. So it featured the NASA astronaut. I think it was Shane Kimbrough giving the 5 children clues, and they were going to do a scavenger hunt, and they just happened to casually run into Harris on her porch of the VP residence. So it was kind of interesting, and it just felt uneasy. And it felt, of course it was staged. We have actors, but it just felt that way. But I will have to say something positive. I'm glad Brett brought that up. At least she's doing something with the kids on that. I think because you really haven't seen her doing anything except, the campaign stopped. So just getting out and being with the kids, I think that's something we need to do. We've had some great vice presidents in the last 30 years, and they were not just involved with this little stuff. They were being involved in major issues, but it just seems that this one here is, I don't know if they're holding or keeping her out of the public. I don't know the deal, but it doesn't seem she's involved with much. I mean, what's your take on it?
I think we have her in bubble wrap, to be honest, and we're trying to protect her because in 3 years we need her to run for president because this guy with 36% approval rating ain't going to quite make it to what we need. And so we need the next person in which we think that we're hitching our wagon to her. So something I'll say, and you, Coach, you know me very well that I will rarely use a reference like this, but I'm going to use it this time. I see this as no different than Joseph Goebbels. And I will rarely refer somebody in a direct sense to a Nazi person. I don't believe in it. But if you think about this is I went and researched Nazi war propaganda movies and Nazi propaganda movies. You got the Panorama, you got the Der Grosse König, and then you got about 40 other ones. And this is not much different than that right there. Hey, America, here's the vice president, and here's all these other people that we're not going to tell you they're actors, but you found out, and we're going to do the scripted thing for you and all this other stuff. And we're going to stage it, and because you trust us, and we're going to throw that trust right back at you. Kind of what Don said, she's catered to her base because she did not win a single individual over with that. I'm just throwing it out there because there is no trust in this administration, and that stems from 3 people. I won't go into party-wise. It just stems to three people. It stems to the president, who doesn't answer questions. It stems to the vice president, who's been appointed certain things but has never done those things. And that she's been appointed, you would think that she would, like you and I said, stand up for women's rights. And crickets, complete crickets on Afghanistan women, young ladies, and things of that nature, complete crickets. But the second we post a picture of a guy on a horse holding the reins, we got to come out and talk that like that was the only thing that we had to talk about the whole time we're vice president. That's my vice presidency right there. And then the third person is Jen Psaki, that when she came out and said, we're going to run the most transparent White House press secretary corps there ever has been, and then goes about face right after those words popped out of that mouth. And you're just like, there's some questions I've watched just as recent as today. And I'm going, you forgot why you're the press secretary. Okay. He asked you a question instead of defending the president. And I know that is your job. I fully understand that. And trying to belittle the person asking the question, maybe you should say something a little different in tone, the way you say it. Just throwing it out there. Maybe you should sit there and go, we need to research that. That does sound strange. But instead, she has come out, and I don't mean to turn it to her, but I will for a second, because these three people is what's deteriorated the trust in that administration. But she come out and said, well, I didn't agree to that policy. She goes, whoa, you're not the president. The president sits in the White House, not you. You just come and transfer information so we can understand your presidents. And that is not being done. She is disseminating information to defend the president instead of disseminating information so we can understand what he's doing. And so the other thing I'll say with this here, though, is I wish that the next president that we have is as approachable as Donald J. Trump, and the press is as nice as they are to Joe Biden. That would be nice to have. But speaking of Kamala Harris here, I think it's no secret that everybody that pulls the strings, the master of puppets, pulls the strings, wants her to be president. Thinks that that's their shoe in because she's a woman. She'll pull the draw automatically because women will resonate with her. I'm telling you, there's a whole lot of women that I can tell you that do not resonate with her in the least. Yeah. And this here as a staged event just cuts whatever woman you thought you was going to pull in, who've got where they got by busting their ass and not having staged events to get there. And I'll say that as nice as I can. It just stabs them in the back. And they're like, so it's all make believe, because that's what it seems like right now, that is make believe. I don't know. That's just me. Go ahead, Coach.
I mean, I tell you, it's like the pandemic helped Joe Biden. And I hate to bring up this situation, but what it did, it made him not have to be in the public, in front of crowds, in front of live TV. And I think what that happened, that was, at first, I don't think it was something that was planned, but they saw, aha, it's actually helping him because he's a stuttering idiot sometimes. Now I believe that's become their playbook with Harris, to keep her out of the public's eye. Don't give her a job that she can mess up in the public, because the mainstream media is not going to call her out. They're not. They're terrified of racism. They're terrified of gender call. They're terrified of a lot of things with the left. So what we're doing is we're going to keep her in the background, just like you said, Vet, because what we're going to do is we're going to throw her out there in 3 years as the greatest woman in the history of the world to run against the evil Donald Trump or whoever they decide to push as Donald Trump's guy, because I think that's where it's going. And there, to be honest with you, I hate to say this, if she can stay in the background and no controversy happens, I don't believe that she's going to be beat. I mean, that's just my take.
I don't know. And so, one thing with the president, and I'll throw this out there, he came on and said, I'm going to unify the country. And as soon as those words exited his mouth, then he bashed Republicans. So much for all that. And he's continuously done that. Jen Psaki has done that. And Kamala Harris has done it. Now, what I will say is, let's don't forget how you got to be president number 46. Enough people were pissed off at Donald J. Trump that some Republicans voted for you. And let's don't forget that independents voted for you, because you would not be president if you solely relied on your Democrats. So you might want to bite that tongue a little bit, put some Ajax on it, wash it out. I don't care what you do with it. freaking clean that shit up and learn how to talk that unifying message that you brought in with. I don't know, maybe some things that America likes. I'm just throwing it out there. I understand what you're saying, though, Coach, that she may very well be the front runner. And as well as I do, if she becomes a front runner for the Democratic Party, that there will be money that we ain't ever – remember, we could not afford $6.5 billion for the wall, but now we're wishing we built a damn wall, because we can only spend $3.5 trillion on this next bill coming up. But you will see in the we will be getting close in campaign funds that will be trickling up in that area of trying to scratch that trillion from those big donors that that we claim that Republicans have. And I touch my chest, but I'm a conservative. But we claim that Republicans have when we all know where the real money comes from, don't we, Nancy Pelosi? But anyway, moving along.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So does anybody else got anything on the VP before we get going here?
Sure. Right. I'll just throw one last thing in there just because, the whole commercial, bringing it back to the commercial, is all about, space and advertising all the great things that are going on. But, maybe I missed it, but I don't recall her praising the fact that we sent a 90-year-old man into space with William Shatner. And, it wasn't just William Shatner on that flight. There were at least one woman was on that flight. And we've now had 3, granted they're all billionaires, but we've had 3 billionaires now that have invested, their own capital and raised their own money and shown that space exploration can be possible without the assistance of the government. I guess we use their launch pads, but I'm sure those 3 companies rented those out or leased them for purposes of that flight. But that's a great American story, really, for 2 of those. Branson, a great story for, Europe as well. But those are great stories to talk about how human ingenuity can accomplish those things. And, if space is your thing and you're going to ignore all the other things that are your things, like the border and women's rights and everything else that you've been asked for, and you've decided that you're going to embrace this space thing, well, then embrace it and talk about the greatness that's happened with it. Don't hire a bunch of actors.
Exactly.
Don, but 90-year-old man doesn't stroke the flames of a conservative housewife to vote for you, whereas children do. Yeah. Oh, okay, Coach. So, Brett, you got anything, Coach? Are we good, or what? Or
I think we're good. To me, it just seems like everything I see with Kamala Harris, it's almost like she's still on the campaign trail, if that makes sense. Like she's out here to get, it's like publicity, and she's doing this to make herself more personable. Like, you have the job, now we just need you to execute. And it's kind of weird that every social situation she's in has nothing to do with the role of a vice president. So that's all I have.
All right. So as we get ready to go to the next topic
on The View, though.
Yeah, that didn't pan out. That didn't pan out well on The View. I don't know. And almost everything that she's done publicly has not panned out well at all. Let's face facts.
Keep in the background, vet. You got to keep her in the background until 2022-ish, 23. Throw her out there and let her start campaigning, and she'll be the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah. When she could not beat 25 other candidates, But yeah, I agree. So with that, got to throw a little advertisement out here for us and our good friends at Metro Geek in Granbury, Texas. Any needs that you have, please hook them up. We're going to get some stuff on their sponsorship later. I don't have that right now, unfortunately. But for us, the Coach and the Vet, what pays for our website is stuff like this. Go to our webpage. And then as you go there, if you don't mind, come in, get some of this stuff right here or some of this stuff and be cool, because Christmas is coming and you can only be so cool as to wearing the Coach and the Vet. And as Don has down there, the Loose Cannon's got a Coach and the Vet shirt. I got a Coach and the Vet shirt. So please, by all means, hook us up here. And as Coach Ingram, who I just saw, he just wrote, the main reason why Biden won't be impeached is because Harris is there. So I have no doubt there, Coach. I agree with you on that part. This moves to our next topic. And so I'm just going to throw it out here. We got two logisticians on here, so we kind of understand supply chain things pretty well. And as Don will attest, the guy that helps instructs majors progress through the military, I think him and I would be considered in the category of being expert logisticians. I don't know. I would throw that out there. Just a tad. So I think this is a great topic, and we're going to hit Brett up first. But I'm going to ask, what are your thoughts on the supply chain problem at the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Los Angeles with ships anchored off coast, and we're not getting the goods? So,
Well, it's a very complex problem, right? Being an instrument and not a logistician, right? So I'll qualify myself before I start, right? So you're looking at a complex network and complex problem. Obviously, shipping industry in the United States is obviously it's a private industry, right? But this goes back to it's months of buildup. There's global storms. You got COVID, right, which shut down some of the ports abroad, and these kind of issues, it's been brewing, right? It's not something that happens overnight. And then, of course, you got decades of imports from China that are backing up at sea. So to me, there's a couple aspects I want to touch on. Not necessarily the shipping industry and the downfall and how we got there. But one of the things I looked at most of all, obviously, as an instrument and not a logistician, is how this is going to transfer over to my family, right? So when you start to think of this, right, and I looked up some data here, obviously you're going to have less goods to sell. Everybody talks about Christmas and how you're not going to have, presents under the tree and so forth, right? But some people will, right? You have to increase wages in the shipping industry because nobody wants to work. Because private industry is now competing with the government, right? And enhanced unemployment benefits, those kind of things, right? It's the same thing in the shipping industry and the trucking industry that's slowing down this process. No different than when you go to a restaurant and you can't eat because you don't have a server, right? It's the same concept. People aren't working in the shipping industry. People aren't working in the trucking industry, and it's going to transfer over to the consumer, right? That's the biggest thing for me, not how we got there, but how it's going to relate to me over the next 6 to 8 months, right? So when you have less goods to sell, increased wages in the shipping industry, the rising costs of shipping containers, right? I want to look at the consumer is going to absorb those costs, right? I looked up some data, right? And it looked like in January of this year, it was about $5,000 to have a shipping container shipped, right? By June, that price went up to almost $10,000. Right now, the current estimate for one Connex, right, is $23,000, right? So that money is going to transfer over to the consumer. We've had a lot of worldly problems to cause the backup. And right now, the only answer for the Biden administration is to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we'll see how it's going to work out. But the one thing I want to concentrate on is what's it going to do to inflation and how much is your dollar going to be worth in a few months. So I'll stop there and let Don pick it up with the background of the shipping industry. I'll let the logisticians talk about the quagmire out off the coast. So.
Go ahead, Don. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, so, everything Brett said is spot on, except for one piece. This isn't a 6 month or 9 month fix. This is going to take years. It's going to have years of impact. Some of that is honestly good, and some of it is bad. Here's an interesting stat. China accounts for 60% of the global consumer goods exports across the globe. 60%. So that means we have put all our eggs in one basket, essentially. And before we saw these supply chain issues manifest on our coasts, China was drastically hurt because, that's the start point of that supply chain. And there's been some goodness out of that. The increase in exports or the increase in manufacturing and growth in Mexico and Vietnam and some other places has grown over the past year, partly because of their responses to COVID versus our country's response to COVID. But we've imposed some major disruptions into that supply chain ourselves, outside of just the over-reliance on China. We have drastically cut down manufacturing in our country. That has an impact. Even if we're not a major manufacturer on the global stage, it has an impact. We paid people to stay at home for over a year, but we didn't really decrease our consumption in this country because we paid everyone to live at the standard of living they were living before that. So we've now dropped supply for an entire year while maintaining the demand at the same level. And so that's going to have an impact at some point. And that's what we're seeing. And it's not just on the manufacturing side. It's all on the distribution and delivery side as well. Sure, there's a problem on the coast of California. Now, but that's not the only problem. I mean, right now, today, we're seeing the news articles where, okay, we're now getting containers off ships, but the port's full. So now we're putting containers in people's yards and in random parking lots throughout California because there's no place to store them. Why? Because we don't have the truck drivers. Okay, so we have the truck drivers, but what are we missing next? The distribution centers. We don't have the people working in the distribution centers. I mean, all these individual pieces have to be worked out one at a time to be able to see the entire supply chain return to some kind of level of efficiency. The other challenge is we have, for years, and Ian and I can attest to this as well, the number one metric, and I would argue probably the sole metric that we've used to measure success of our supply chains is efficiency. And so when the metric is purely efficiency and we're not measuring other things like resiliency of the supply chain, redundancy of the supply chain, then when that efficiency is disrupted, we haven't created resilient supply chains. We haven't created redundant supply chains. We've only created efficient supply chains. And I think if there's one other lesson we can take out of this, it's government cannot solve the problems. Sure, Biden can say keep the ports open for 24 hours. That doesn't solve the problem. Amazon, Walmart, they're working through it themselves and they're solving the problems. I guarantee you we'll see on their shelves enormous stocks for Christmas. And it'll be the mom and pop places that don't have the ability to solve this global problem on their own, like Amazon, Walmart are doing right now. But it'll trickle down eventually, and other smaller companies will be able to resolve the supply chains. I think it requires them and the ingenuity of companies that work for a profit to resolve it, and the government just won't be able to solve this. And if we rely on the government, it's not going to be 2 years, 3 years to fix this. It's going to be 5 years or a decade to fix it.
I'm going to throw it over to the coach. Go ahead, coach.
Man, what Don said there at the very end is exactly what I was talking about today in class. Is if you allow the free market to do what it does, people are in business, especially large corporations. They're in business for a profit. They're going to figure out a way. Leave them alone. Don't regulate them as much as you want to as a government, especially today. Walmart, Amazon, these big companies will figure out a way to get that stuff to the consumers because that's what they do. They want those profits. They're not going to lose business because of a problem. To them, a problem is an obstacle. It's not the end. Let's get the government to help. It's an obstacle that we're going to overcome. Let's just figure it out. And that's the greatest thing about the free market system is that if you allow people to do what they do, keep the government regulations, guidelines out of it, it'll figure itself out. Now, I did see something just recently that where the ports in California, and I was going to ask Don and Brett about this, they're starting to send stuff up to Portland. But to me, that's a diversion because like Don had pointed out, the biggest problem is you can get the stuff unloaded, but you still got the truckers, then you got the distribution, you got the people working the pallets all the way down to people putting it on the shelves that we've had a problem with for the last year because people are being paid to stay at home. And one of the things that's happened is the more you stay at home, just from my house, I'm going to say this real light so my wife won't hear it, they buy more stuff now because they're at home more. And you buy more stuff from Amazon or from China or whatever, there's more and more people coming.
Go to fiber.com.
Okay. So one thing I'll say here is regarding this is Carl Padgett, a good friend of mine and the coaches here, sent me an article regarding this. And we've talked a lot about, pieces that are broken in here and expectation. And I agree with you, Don. It's going to take a little while. And I'm going to revert back to that in a minute. But some of this was self-imposed. I mean, if we had a gun right now, I could actually hand that over to Gavin Newsom. I could actually hand that over to the governor of California, Newsom, and say, pull out your foot and go ahead and pull the trigger, hero, because you did this. Because in 2011, not 2011, but he passed a law called AB 5. And AB 5 says that you cannot have truckers in California with a truck older than 2011 edition. So you killed your own distribution chain by trying to be cool with the liberal side and sit there and say, I'm fixing emissions because I don't have old trucks. Gonna kill all that stuff right there. He shot himself in the damn foot on his own regulation, to be quite honest with you. He exacerbated the problem because he thought he was being cutesy and appealing to the green side of the world, and actually he became more disruptive. So that's the first thing I'll say. I will say this also, Don, one thing, if we remember when Obama left office, we had an industrial base problem within the United States Army. And then within the industrial base problem, they told the president and some AMC commander that it would take over 2 to 3 years to fix the industrial base problem. And it was fixed in 18 months. So I think you got to have the right guy, which we all know that it doesn't seem like this is the right guy because he's very reactionary and not proactive. So two things I want to talk about here is the administration not proactive enough to help the problems with this? And I know you talked about the government being out of it and let businesses take over, Coach John Brent, and so did you, Don. But their lack of stepping in any way, or they exacerbating the problem. And another thing is, and I wrote an article on it, did picking the totally inexperienced logistician, because he was not a logistician, Pete Buttigieg, who's been off for paternity leave for 2 months, who has absolutely zero, none on the Palm Fritz experience in this, to be the Secretary of Transportation. Did that really help us or did that hurt us? I'm just throwing it out there because, who does the president go to for his wisdom? I would suspect him. So I'm throwing it over to Don, and we'll go to Brett, and we'll go to the coach after that.
Yeah, I won't be able to remember everything that we just threw out there, but I'll start with what you said with Gavin Newsom and the policies that were put in place in California. That's a perfect example of government stepping in, one, but also having our supply chain focused on efficiency versus redundancy. Sure, there's some efficiencies with having the newest equipment in terms of trucks, but the policy should not have been written as that as a requirement. Maybe it should have been written that as a preference. We should select, trucks above 2016 as the primary method for distribution in California, but as a redundant measure, we will allow other trucks. And that's what I'm getting at. We have not built supply chains off of redundancy, solely off of efficiency. And so there's nowhere to go when that efficiency breaks down. I'll tell you where the government probably should step in, though, is that we have a significant threat to the DoD supply chain system. And so Walmart, Amazon, they can fix the commercial supply chain system. But someone does need to step in, and maybe this is where Buttigieg should figure out his role as a former infantry guy and mayor of whatever town he was a mayor of up there in Indiana or wherever it was. But our reliance on microchips out of China for Department of Defense, raw minerals and raw materials out of China as well. We in our national security strategy just state China as our biggest threat, but it is our sole reliant partner in terms of our own DoD supply system. Medicines, we might not remember, but at the start of the whole COVID pandemic, there was a significant issue with medicines because not all medicines, but a large majority of medicines are coming out of China as well, in terms of the elements that make up this, to manufacture medicines. So we've put our defense health system, our Department of Defense system, on primary reliance on who we say is our biggest threat. That's something that the government needs to address and fix. And I guess I would just say, to answer the question on does it make sense to open up the other port north of the 2 in California, without looking, I would say perhaps would have to look into it. There's probably some holding fees and penalty fees that we're paying on a daily basis for every one of those ships that's sitting at sea in a parking lot, much like we would all pay fees if we parked our car at the airport. There's fees being charged for us to have those ships not downloaded on schedule. And so I guess there would have to be some kind of a cost analysis done. Does it save us money by having those ships repositioned somewhere else and download, and we just pay those storage fees on the ground versus on the ocean? But I'm not sure, but there could be a valid financial reason why we did that.
Don, I'll say this real quick. 2 things is you hit it a second, those container fees. And people that don't know, we paid through the tooth for containers in Iraq because we paid every day they set in Iraq. I think it was like $250 a day or something like that. I can't remember. Every day a container set in Iraq, way more worth more than the freaking container ever was. Don't quote me on the price because I'm not 100% sure on that, but that was back in the day. We paid through the tooth. That's 1. And 2, I believe Buttigieg was a naval intelligence officer. I could be wrong on that. And which that, Ken, I'm sorry if you're still on here. That explains things. There's not a lot of intelligence over in that area. But anyway, moving along, we'll throw it over to Brett real quick. So go ahead, Brett.
There's 2 things I want to concentrate here, right? The transportation secretary, right? Seeing him do interviews. This is the way this administration is going to spin it, right? So it's going to be a spin. So why is this in mainstream media? Why do you think it's so popular, right? I want to tell you why. Because they're going to say, and they already have, that because the Biden administration has gotten so much and unemployment's down and people are earning more under his administration, right, that we have all this money to spend, right? So people are ordering more. And then they're going to keep it in the news so that it'll be fresh in your head when we sign a $4 trillion infrastructure bill. And they're going to push the fact that, hey, there's $111 billion in this infrastructure bill to solve these problems that Don's talking about, right? And that's what the administration is going to do. They're going to keep it fresh so that when you say, wow, we probably need this because look at all these ships in the ocean, right? And they're going to use it to their advantage. And that's going to be the spin. The last thing I want to talk about is coming up from Eastern Kentucky. For 20 years, we told kids to go to college and go to technical school. It just means you're not dumb enough, right? Or you're too dumb to get into college. So when you go out to schools or you go to colleges, right, it's okay to go to technical school, right? Because over here in Eastern Kentucky, right, we're begging for truck drivers or try to get something worked on. So one of the problems, right, in this whole, the logistician and in the chain is we don't have the people trained to do the jobs. So they're trying to push CDLs through here in the state of Kentucky with a lot less paperwork, a lot less legwork. But we need to go back and teach kids that it's okay to go to heating and air school, to be an electrician and to be a truck driver, and quit going to college to get a gender studies degree. That's not going to get you anywhere. So that's all I have over the rest of it.
Before I throw it over to the coach, one thing I'll say, when it comes to that spin, every time I see a spin or hear a spin, I go, wasn't you going to be the most transparent White House that we ever seen? And now you're spinning it and think that we don't see that shit? I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, even my son, who's 16, can see that. I'm throwing it over to you, Coach. Go ahead.
Well, you have to look at this. We're supposed to have we're talking about the Secretary of Transportation, you got to get the baby off the tit and do something. What I'm saying with that is this, and I'm saying it seriously, and you get the baby off the tit, man. I couldn't believe when I saw that picture, but this reminds me back to Hurricane Katrina. Michael Brown was director of FEMA. He resigned from that job because he was pushed out because he did not know how to lead when there was a crisis. This is a crisis. You get your face out of the house, let your husband handle the baby, and you come out here and lead. They've got a problem right now. If And being a coach, if we're having a losing season, I expect the general manager, I expect the athletic director to get more involved when there's a major issue. We have Buttigieg sitting at the house, literally, I hate to say it again, with a baby on his tit as we have them stacking up out there in C, and people cannot get these goods and people are losing their jobs. You have got to get up off the couch and come lead. If you don't, resign. Get somebody else in that position that can go out there and do it right now. Even if it's like you say, even if it's just the face of it, it looks terrible. We need somebody walking up to the mic, tapping on it, going, okay, I'm here. We're going to figure this out. Instead of, it's like no one's talking about it, like how we're going to fix it. We're just talking about the problems, and it's going to sooner or later fix itself. That's not leadership, vet. That's not what you would do when you're dealing with a platoon. That's not what I'm going to do if I've got a losing season going on. I'm going to try to lead these men or this problem to a fix. And Buttigieg and his husband need to be on the background because this is his job right now, and get this fixed, then go back home and raise your toddler.
Well, so one thing I wrote about this, I wrote about Buttigieg on this, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to throw it to Don and throw it around real quick. We'll only have a few minutes, but we got plenty of time. I venture to say that the president would have been better served if he would have selected a sergeant first class who is seasoned and retired that spent at least 18 months on brigade SPO in the distribution section, or a major that had been in the brigade SPO of a sustainment brigade. I will have to say that exercised downrange somewhere would have been far, 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 far better served than Buttigieg ever could do in this job. And what's crazy is there's experience out there that could have led him since March on this. There really is. And I'll just throw it over to Don, and then we'll throw it around real quick. I mean, I don't know. What's your thoughts on that, Don?
Yeah, I guess I do want to make a minor retraction after hearing Coach. I mean, you all are right. There is something the government should be doing with regards to the supply chain issues, and it shouldn't be solely left to Walmart and Amazon. But it isn't taking our tax dollars and throwing it in different programs and things like that. And it's not creating a new policy. It's what Coach said. It's about being a leader. And so in this circumstance, it could be a leadership role in bringing in some of these major corporations to solve some of the problems. It could be bringing in some of these corporations to eliminate some of these fees that are being associated with detention charges or holding charges or late penalties, and convince companies to remove those for the betterment of the entire nation. Because all that is, like Brett said, it's going to trickle down. Every dollar that is added to the expense of that supply chain is just going to be translated into a higher price Starbucks coffee or higher price gallon of milk or a more expensive 2x4. So there is a role, and it is taking a leadership position in helping others work through these problems. But please don't take that $3.1 trillion stimulus, like Brett alluded to, and use this as an excuse to take another $46,000 out of each homeowner's paycheck to pay for something that we don't have money to pay for.
So, Don, I'm going to say this, and I'll throw it over here real quick. Somebody asked me, well, since you know everything like you think you do, who do you know that would do better? And like I alluded to, a sergeant first class that worked in Sustainment Brigade and SPO, I know about 50 people that could knock this out of the park, that the alternative would be 180. Would it be fixed perfectly? No, but we would be on the right track for doing it. And like you said, we wouldn't have to dip into monies and things of that nature. I can name 50 of them, like real quick, that are sustainers, that this is what they do. Go ahead, Brett.
Well, being an infantry guy, I don't know much about logistics other than I really appreciated the food and the ammunition. But I do want to reflect on one thing, right? That true, the spin will happen, right? They'll keep this in the news, and exactly what you're talking about. They'll keep the government's involvement out of it long enough, right, until they need this money or this infrastructure bill, and they've already started talking about it. And they're going to keep it fresh in your head that you're not going to have Christmas because we didn't sign this bill. That's number one. Number two is there's a former president I know that when you don't know what you don't know, you have the round table, right? And I seen it in January 2017 when the auto industry says, hey, we're going to move here. We're going to go to Mexico. Labor's cheaper. And you know what he did? He brought in the heads of every executive or auto executive in. And he said, introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, right? And then we're going to solve this problem. And I guarantee you, if President Trump was in office right now, he would have the Teamsters, the union, he would have dock workers, and he would have whoever from every private industry that ships in the ocean. They would be at the White House and they would be discussing it. So that's my opinion.
To be honest, Brett, I'll throw it to you, Coach. We would have our new Operation Warp Speed, but it would be Operation Distribution Speed is what we would be having right now. And he would probably pick the AMC General to be running that too, like the Operation Warp Speed. So go ahead, Coach.
Well, I have a few heroes, American heroes, and one of my American heroes was Dr. Ben Carson. But it has nothing to do with Dr. Ben Carson being the head of HUD, which I think was a joke. I love Ben Carson, and what he did and became famous for was being a great doctor. I think what we do sometimes is we put people in positions because it looks good or it's someone that you owe a favor to. And the Buttigieg being being the Secretary of Transportation would be like Mike Krzyzewski's wife coaching the Cowboys. Okay, it makes no sense what I just said, but it makes no sense to have this guy as your Secretary of Transportation. What you do is you take somebody that's been in the transportation industry or someone that's been in the industry of distribution and you put them in that position. You take someone that's worked 40 years in housing and development and you put them in HUD and so on. But what we've done is we become more political that, hey, you do this for me and I'll take care of you. And it doesn't matter what it looks like because you owe them a favor. And then when there's a problem like Katrina or this coming on, we go, oops. Well, your oops is we got a major problem. And I do agree what Brett said. President Trump, President Bush, President even Obama, if there was a problem like this, I really believe those three would say, bring me the head of all of Amazon, Walmart, give me these people. We need these people now to figure this out because they're not going to lose money. So let's figure it out and help everybody out, even the mom and pop places. But you got this guy, and I'm not going to say it again. I'm not going to say it again that he's on the you know what. But I'm saying he needs to do his job or give it to someone else.
So we're going to get ready to close here, but there's a lot of great points. And Brett, I think you brought a lot to the table, and Don, you brought a lot to the table. One thing, and Coach, you as well. I like to get it off the tip part. But moving along with Don here, as a logistician, I think one thing you knocked it out of the park on, and that is we have always, as logisticians, focused on efficiency instead of redundancy. And there are times that we've got in the military that we got away from redundancy, where redundancy would have been a good thing to have, to be quite honest. It had postured us a little bit better strategically. We just were a lot more redundant. And I think that's a very true statement, because all we're focused on is time is money, efficiency, and going, okay, but what are the levee breaks? What do we do now? That we've kind of got that out of our nature of being more and more capitalistic, which I'm all for being as capitalistic as possible. But I think that I do agree that's a major problem thinking back of everything that I've been around. I don't know. So we got about 5 minutes. So I'm going to throw it to everybody to get about a minute in to say goodbye here and say what's on your mind. And then we're going to kick it off here.
No, I appreciate it. It was a pleasure. I always enjoyed doing this. Coach's last comment made me chuckle because I was thinking of Biden calling all these folks together. And I'm just picturing Biden saying, get me the leaders of Blockbuster Video and Borders, and naming all these companies that don't even exist anymore because he's just so out of touch. So it wouldn't work. He wouldn't even know who to call.
He'd say Piggly Wiggly.
But anyway, I'm sure he would have a staff that helped him. But when Coach was saying that, that was the image that came through in my head, and it just made me chuckle. So I wanted to share it. But thanks for letting me participate tonight, guys.
As a first timer, I'd like to say, hey, thanks, man. Hopefully I get to come back. And a great conversation tonight, Don. I really appreciate your input on a lot of things. But you're right. as a family man and a retiree on a fixed income, a lot of the problems that we're about to face are they're going to get worse, right? They say goods are up 5% from this time last year, and by Christmas, I guarantee you they'll be up about 10%. Your dollar is going to be worth about 88 cents of what it was in January, and that's what concerns me is the cost of living for those of us who are retired. So, but thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Mm-hmm.
Well, I learn so much every single time I have smart people on here. Thank goodness for smart people, because that keeps me going ahead and learning. One of the things that I will say about it, and I'm a little bit, I'm with Brett on this, is I'm a little bit terrified going forward as a family. We both work, thank goodness. We have a disabled son. We got one that's about to go to college, one that's in the third year of a 4-year college. Things are going up daily. I don't see that there's some, snap of the finger thing that's going to happen. I believe it's going to continue to get worse before we get better. And I don't even know what can make it better right now. We're so divided as what we believe we should do economically in this country. And that's scary to me, because it used to always be, you might have a political divide, or you might have a debate on who's better to lead us out of a recession or out of a tough time. But we always seem to have the same ballpark of, we want to be better as Americans, but what does it mean to be a great American right now is even up for grabs. And it's kind of scary, because, when the words "make America great again" is divisive and considered racist, you've got a problem, because why do we not want to find the best time that we could think about in the last 100 years and go, let's repeat that? I mean, what's wrong with that? And we're talking about today in class with a bunch of inmates that are just begging to get out in this world, because they know there's so many jobs out there right now. And we decided that the 1950s might have been the best of the last 100 years. Families were together. More people were living in neighborhoods. Suburbia was building. Everybody were going to church. School was a different way. We started segregation just a few years later. Do you ever think we're going to have that again, Vet? That we're actually going to have that America where that's the value that we have? So all this is scary economically, but from a moral standpoint, man, I really think we've got issues that we're going to have to deal with, and I hope we'll talk about them. And I'd love to have Brett and Don back, because there is some smart people in the room, Vet.
I agree, Coach. So one thing, you've heard me say this. Well, first of all, I'd say the 50s or the 80s, because we can't get rid of the hairband music. That's just how it is. So, but I've said, as we progress and as the time of information age has come, history repeats itself, but now it just tends to repeat itself faster. So we've faced our 50s and 60s. We faced the 60s and 70s. But now if we start looking back 100 years ago or more, we came out of a great war. We had a pandemic. And then about 10 years later, we had that little thing called the Great Depression. We're just sprinkling those seeds for that right now. And I think the deal is we may face something significant like that, the way things are going, but I think it will come out of it faster. And I think all of those things will just happen faster than being drawn out as much. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong on that. I would love to be wrong on that, and I pray I'm wrong on that. But that is sad to think of that, it's just how things are, because we are laying those seeds and groundwork to that right now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Vet. And one of the things that I still look at hope is we're the greatest country in the world. And the way that, even with all these problems and diversity issues that we have and division that we have, is there's still people crossing oceans, swimming rivers, and running through deserts to get here. And there's nobody in Dallas, Texas going, hey, let's move to Venezuela, because this is the place you want to be, not there. So there is still something here. We just have to believe it's great again.
I agree. And I will say, if this economy fails, the whole world economy fails. It's just the way it is. So, but anyway, so I got to say this, from the coach
to the vet.
Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned.